right, so this is the third house. Okay, so if you're not yet following me on Instagram, please follow me at Amethyst Virgo. I do original horoscopes there each month, and I also sometimes do some energy readings and some other astrology posts. This is the third house. I also have the 12th house, a lot of 12th house videos, and I also have a 4th house video, and I'm going to do the 8th house one soon. So if you have a suggestion for what I should do after the 8th house, you can drop me a comment. It was a subscriber requested. There was a question he had about the 8th house placement. So I was like, well, I'll just do the 8th house next and I'll tap into that. I'll touch on that question. So if you ever have questions, sometimes I might turn them into videos because I feel like they can help other people, or it's a question that is something I'm already planning to do. So if you start to realize you need a lot of help, you have a lot of questions that I can't answer in like a couple of sentences, then I would suggest you get a birth chart reading. Again, I always say, you know, birth chart reading doesn't have to be with me, but once you start trying to connect all the dots, you need someone to sit down and look at the chart, because otherwise it's just like bits and pieces, and it's hard to put things together when you do it that way. You actually need to look at the whole thing and then see how they connect. So I will, I have my Shopify link in this video. And I do readings on a rotating basis. I don't do readings all month because at the end of the month, near the end of the month, I need to do horoscopes and prepare for that and all those types of things. So now let's move on. So Mercury rules the 3rd house. Mercury also rules the 6th house. So I already have some videos on Mars. I have Mars, I have Jupiter, I have Venus, I have the moon. I don't have Pluto. But I have a couple of videos, Mercury, where I already go over the planets and through each house. So I'm not going to spend like 20 minutes on each placement because I've already done this, but I want this video to kind of just, you know, capture the 3rd house energy, because I do have some people who come to the videos for their own placements and some people are learning astrology. So that's why I do things this way. So, you know, 3rd house, we're dealing with information, communication. We now have to be rational in the 3rd house. We're here to be objective in the 3rd house. So it's important to see what some of the 3rd house placements are, because now we're seeing what type of communicator are they? How does this person communicate? In which way do they communicate? Also, then we can also look at the early life, right? Do these people have siblings? Is there an indicator what the sibling relationship was like? Because remember, the 3rd house is early socialization. So that's why schooling is also in there as well. Neighborhood is associated with the 3rd house. Learning is associated with the 3rd house. News, information, things that you get. The information, who do you get it from type of, and what type of information interests you, okay? Logic lives in the 3rd house. So the 3rd house is very important. All the houses are important, but we have to understand where we're coming from when it comes to how we're engaging with people. Because yes, your 3rd house placement is going to impact how you engage with other people. Your Saturn in the 3rd house, you're more serious perhaps than a Jupiter in the 3rd house. All right. And the reason I said also, you know, the sibling relationships is you can also have indicators to how it is now. Right, like, you know, Saturn sometimes can mean like there's a disconnect in some way. You know, if you have the moon there, it might be a closer type of relationship, something there. Now, when we look at the 3rd house, we're also looking at the fact this is before the 4th house, right? So the 4th house is where we come from, our home. The 3rd house, though, is now dealing more with what types of information do we get, and it's dealing more with the objectivity of things. So when we look at 3rd house placements, you have to understand that now we're not looking at feelings, we're not looking at emotions, we're looking at objectivity. We're looking at the type of information you get, the type of information that you receive, what type of information interests you, right? Because you can definitely see someone's interests in the 3rd house when it comes to what types of things do they like to learn about. We start thinking about learning 3rd house. Siblings, sometimes in a birth chart, yes, you can look at someone's 3rd house if there's placements in it and see. Now, I would say most likely, usually what I've seen, 2 or more placements in the 3rd house can indicate there's siblings. 1 placement usually means, for some people, it's like there's not a lot of siblings. An empty house is just an empty house. I don't think there's a significant thing with that. I'm just telling you what I have experienced in the charts that I have interpreted, okay? Now, I'm not going to go in order because I'm going to start with the signs of the planets I know best, okay? There are timestamps here if you want to go to the ones that really interest you. So Saturn and Pluto. I have Saturn and Pluto in my 3rd house. I have the South Node in my 3rd house as well, my Scorpio. So Saturn in the 3rd house. One, let me start with early life. So typically early life, they would have been seen as like serious children, I think sometimes. Now, if someone has Saturn and another planet in their third house, sometimes that can mean something different. But Saturn in the third house, you tended to be a serious child, maybe a little bit mature in terms of what you understood, right? Maybe you were mature in what you understood about life in some way, shape, or form. Saturn people, though, Saturn in third house, you know, you want to understand things. You might challenge yourself. There's a lot of challenge with knowledge. Not knowledge, information. Knowledge is ninth house. The reason I say this because as a Saturn, Saturn in the third house, I never minded taking tests. It didn't bother me because I was always trying to prove to myself, like, oh, can I do well on this? Can I do well on that? Now, except for subjects that I already knew that I was like, listen, I'll get an A in these classes. I'll settle for a B in this class because like math and science was just not, I could do it, but it wasn't my passion. So it was just kind of like, let me just do this. So like, but in things that I cared about, I was like, let me push myself. I want 100. I want this. I want that. So Saturn people can like take that to serious, take learning to very serious. Like I always liked school for the most part. And in school back when I was growing up, it wasn't as engaging as it is nowadays. Like I'm a teacher, so I know what we do. You know, I know what we have to do. I know the type of experience we give for kids. I know that my school experience was very different than this school experience that I'm seeing students enjoy. Now, everything's different now with this pandemic, but either way, I didn't need a whole clown, you know, popping into my classroom and doing backflips to be interested in school. I just was a kid that liked school. I liked learning. It wasn't that I liked school all the time. It was that I liked the learning. I guess that's what it was. I liked the learning. I liked the new information. Saturn third house tend to have respect for the authority of education. They understand it. Like they're like, no, this is important. We go to school in order to do this. And the interesting thing about it is with school, how serious you take learning. It's interesting because I teach and I also coach teachers at my school. And so there's a student, I didn't teach him directly, but he knew who I was. I knew who he was. And I remember one time, you know, he was just like, he's very bright child, trying to find his way in school, you know, that type of stuff. But he was just like, miss, you take this really serious. You take this learning really serious. Like, no, this is like, it was just funny. It was random. Because, you know, I would go into his class and make sure, you know, they were learning and, you know, see what they were doing and all that type of stuff. So I thought it was funny that he noticed that because it's like, that's a very Saturn in third house observation to make about somebody. You know, that's a very Saturn in third house quality to have, that somebody, a child, notices that. But Saturn in third house people, you take information very serious. You might sometimes take information literally. In terms of taking it serious, though, in my perspective, you know, I also know what worked for me as a child might not work for everybody else. Especially when you got into child astrology and you start looking at your children's planets and stuff and you're like, oh, they're not me. Yes, your kids are not you. So you have to look and see, like, how do I help them, you know, in certain areas. The thing is, though, I do believe that we should be experimental in education, meaning that just because I take it serious, I also think that children should be taught to have their own perspectives about things and to learning is not just a thing that happens in school. Like my kids are learning at home. Even, I'm not talking about this at home pandemic stuff, but I'm talking about in general, like, you know, we foster a really like, hey, you're interested in that you have that question, we'll show you a video about that. You know, like it's that type of dynamic in my household. But yeah, so even though I have that kind of respect for that, like, you need to know something. You need to learn certain things before you can break the rules, is my opinion. You can't, I feel like people have to be informed, and then we can start branching out and saying, okay, this is what I think. This is what I don't think. I don't agree with that. So I don't think that my Saturn placement, I don't think it means like you have to do things a certain way. And school is the only way. Because I also have placements, my North Node is in the 9th house, which is a very different energy than, not very different, but it extends to the 3rd house. The 9th, yes, the 9th and 3rd connection. But yeah, so that's what Saturn is like, you know, serious about learning, serious disposition. You take things serious, you know, pros and cons to everything. Pluto is good at probing and kind of a detective. People with Pluto, I also know a lot of people with Pluto in Scorpio because, you know, when people are born around the same cluster of years. So I know a couple of people, I've done a couple of charts as well of people with Pluto and Scorpio in the 3rd house. So probing. Like, these people are really good at getting the information they need, but they're detectives, so they're not always going to tell you what they're doing. It's not like Mercury. They're not going to tell you what they're doing. So it's like this kind of intensity of like needing to understand things beyond what you learn, beyond what you're told. So I think with Pluto being there in the third house, a lot of times you have someone who should, in some way, shape, or form, they go in depth. But because it's not Mercury or Jupiter, it's like sometimes this is more of an internal type of energy. You are really good at understanding and covering things deeper and knowing things beyond. When something interests you, you're like, I have to figure it out. I have to figure it out. Especially, like I said, these Pluto and Scorpio people. Because Pluto rules Scorpio. So the Pluto and Scorpio generation, like, there's already that energy there. And so sometimes when you have Pluto, though, some people can use these for... Some people can use Pluto for manipulation, you know, if they're negative-sided, whatever sign. So Pluto and Scorpio sometimes can be like manipulation with information, or manipulating people, or, you know, hiding things intentionally in order to control someone. So I always say the good and the bad so that people aren't like, well, you said this about the sign and my friend, like I try to sometimes tell people, this is the possibilities. It's up to you to connect the dots. But yeah, so I have Pluto and Saturn in the third house. So it makes me very intense about learning and having to do like being really like thorough, but also like having to understand things in a more in-depth way. Even things that aren't even interesting. Like it's like, you know, it goes deep. Pluto goes deep. It's like you might get a bill and you're like, okay, I got this bill, but wait, it says this. What does that mean? Let me go look it up. Well, what is this? Well, why is this here? What is this? Like Pluto can kind of you get really down the rabbit hole because you want to know everything about everything. You want to uncover everything about everything. All right. Venus. The reason I'm going to Venus is this reason why. I want to make a connection. So I'm Saturn and Pluto, okay, in Scorpio. So since I was a kid, I've always liked supernatural things. And there's some other 12th house reasons, probably, I'm sure. Supernatural things, but also like, I don't have a problem also as an adult. Like, I watch ID channels sometimes. It gets too much. I can't keep watching stuff about death all the time. Sorry, like I just can't. Sometimes it's just like, I'll watch something every once in a while, but like, I can't anymore. Like, it's very different energy than what I used to. So, but I've always been intrigued by like what happened, why did that happen, where did this person go, what did this, like it's more of a probing type of energy with my Saturn and Pluto, when like it's in Scorpio. And so that's important. I'm not going to go on a tangent, I promise you. But my point is like Scorpio energy is comfortable with tough topics, difficult topics. Scorpio energy is good with topics of death. Now, by good, I mean they can handle it. They can handle it. Similar to, I was watching, there's a show called Deadly Possessions with the haunted objects. And the guy is like, has all these haunted objects. I'm like, wait a minute. What is this? Like, how are you comfortable being in that all the time? That house with all these haunted objects. And I looked him up. His name is Zach. I forgot his last name. But I looked him up and I'm like, he's either a moon in Scorpio or a moon in Libra. I'm like, he's got to be that moon in Scorpio, comfortable with death and comfortable not just with death, but like really, you know, more, you know, I guess like deeper types of spiritual type of things, not the lighthearted stuff. I'm trying to think of the word. I can't. I'm sorry. He also has Uranus and Scorpio. So Scorpio energy is good with like death. That's why some people can be like morticians, like people who are comfortable with like not being afraid of things that are more macabre, or things that are more, you know, depressing. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of, they have a better grasp on that type of stuff. Anyway, sorry for the tangent. Anyway, I know someone who has Venus in the third house and they don't like that type of stuff. They cannot watch horror movies. They do not care about horror movies. They're Venus and Pisces. They do not care about horror movies. They do not care about, they don't want to watch it. They don't want to watch the ID channel. Venus people will more share something with you, like something cute. Like Venus people, sometimes third house, like they want to share and they want to partner with you. They want to do things, but they want to share the information with you that they find is important, but it's usually like a lighthearted type of thing. The Venus and Pisces that I know, they'll share like funny things. They'll share like interesting things, or be like, oh yeah, let's, you know, they want to connect with you through their interest, or they want you to see where you both come together, Venus partnership, and like, what do we like together? What information do we like together? What can we consume together? Because, and these people can also fall in love with words, or, you know, they can create really good words, right? So third house, we're also thinking about writing, not just communication. So Venus people tend to sometimes be really good with their words. They find there's beauty in their words in some way, shape, or form. You know, there's this kind of sincere type of sharing of their words, of their appreciation for things. You'll know what they find valuable because the Venus person in third house is going to tell you typically what they value. Because remember, Venus is not just love, it's value, money as well. It rules Taurus and Libra. An example, this is an interesting example, I think. Stephen King, he has Neptune, no, is it Neptune or Uranus? Neptune in the third house. And then I read that he has Venus in the third house. And I'm like, that's interesting. Now, I don't know the sign it's in, but it's like, think about that kind of like, I'm going to connect to you. I'm going to connect to you through words, right? That's a Stephen King's placement. Also, what's interesting, I was randomly looking on, and they said Arsenio Hall had Venus and Aries in the third house. So if that's true, what's interesting is like Venus, I'm going to connect and partner with you through my words. He had a talk show in the 90s. For those of you who know who Arsenio Hall was, or you old enough to know who he was, or you don't know who he was, he had a talk show in the 90s. And, you know, so Venus, I'm connecting to you. So if you have Venus in the third house, it's like your words are more about connecting to people. It's not like Mercury, where Mercury is like, I'm not connecting you, but I'm telling you the information that's needed. You know, this is more of a partnership of I want to relate to you through my words type of energy going on with Venus. So, also Malcolm X, Venus, I believe, Venus in the third house. So I give you examples and you can see that these people are different, but you kind of can see where we're coming from. So Malcolm X's words are legendary. And so it evokes something in you when you hear him speaking. If you watch any of his old videos, if you read any of his work, like it invokes something in you to hear his words. And also just his appreciation for his people was really pronounced in his words. All right, where do we want to go to now? Mercury. Okay, let's go Mercury. I know, like, why didn't you start with Mercury? But listen, curious, intrigued. Mercury is activated here. It is quality here. It's maximum here. Mercury is here to gather the information and also tell you the information, because Mercury does deal with talking as well. So this Mercury information is more authentic form of that type of energy and that information. We're not just studying it like Saturn, right? We're not just internalizing it like Pluto to transform ourselves. Venus, we're not just kind of, hey, let's see where we all come together type of thing with Venus. Mercury is like fast and communicative and like, I'm giving you the information. It's a very rational type of energy. With Mercury, you're getting what you need. You're not getting, you know, if you had Jupiter here, maybe we exaggerate a little bit. Expansion. You know, if we had the moon here, maybe it's a little bit emotional in nature. Like we have to filter through things before we actually communicate them. With Mercury, it's objective. And so Mercury does best here, the sixth house as well. But Mercury energy is the best here because it's doing what the third house is meant to do. So as you have someone with a third house, so the sun is like a person can get attention for what they say and what they do. We didn't say if it's accurate. We just said that the sun, and I'll get to the sun in a moment. With Mercury in the third house, we're now, any of that energy, this person typically is the go-to. They know something. And that's why the sign is important too, because if you have Mercury in Taurus or Mercury in Virgo or Mercury in Gemini, it's going to be a different type of, what do you master, right? Mercury can kind of master that energy in the third house because it's ruled there. It masters it. So when we look at the sign, then we can see what the person can master. What is the person really good at communicating? What does the person know a lot about? The Mercury in third house person tends to be a good student. Now again, as I always have someone, now it depends on what the sign is, right? Your Mercury was in Aquarius, you kind of maybe want to go your own route. Your Mercury was in Aries, you needed to test things out before you learned it. Or after you learned something, you had to test it out. So you have to always look at the sign. But Mercury in third house typically was someone who took, was a fast student. Now, it doesn't mean they loved the whole process of school, but they loved learning, most likely, for a different reason than Saturn, though. The sun shines, it's noticed here. If someone has a sun in the third house, people listen to them. Their words are taken seriously, right? or they're communicative in some way, shape, or form. It could also be someone who's a writer. So the sun in the third house person is going to be someone who's really good at those types of things. They're shining when it comes to communication. And you have the ability to do that. So if you have the sun in the third house and you're like, well, I don't feel that way yet. Well, you have the ability to do that. Sometimes you just have to hit a certain milestone in your life to know what you're capable of doing. But when you see the sun in the third house, typically that's a person who's going to be known for what they say. You're going to get attention for what you say. So it's good to make sure you know what you're talking about. But the sun in the third house tends to be that kind of really good energy of someone who's not just known for who they are, but through what they know and what they're able to communicate with other people. An example of that is we have Edgar Allan Poe, who obviously we know has been dead for like a very, very, very long time. But when you hear that name, you know that he wrote, and you know that he was really famous for it. So, you know, the sun being in the third house, it's not always this speaker who gets up and tells everybody, everything. Sometimes the third house is really, this person's more magnified in the area of writing, because that's another form of communication and another way of reaching people besides speaking. So the moon, okay, so when the moon is in the third house, we're now driven by thoughts before emotions, which is, the moon is meant to filter out emotions. So what happens when it's in the third house? Well, now we're here, we have to understand that we're thinking about our emotions before we are expressing them. And that can even affect someone's moon in Cancer, where the moon rules Cancer, and like that is supposed to be a stream of emotion. It's very pure. But the third house, now we have a layer over it where we're actually thinking, and it's not even just thinking, we're gathering information in some cases. Before I know how to feel, if I'm a moon in the third house person, I have to now gather the information. I have to understand things. I need the information. Well, what happened? Well, why did you do this? Well, why didn't this happen? Or hey, can I talk to you about this situation? It's almost like it's not, I wouldn't say it's a second, it might be a second guessing of emotions. And the reason I said is because you're putting the moon in a rational house. So the moon isn't free to express. Like even in the first house, the moon can express itself a little bit, right? Because it's a fire house, but we get to see what the person feels. It's a little bit more of a fire under them. We're putting the moon in a rational house. So logic versus emotions in the third house. So yes, it's almost like this person might second guess their feelings sometimes, or need to get the information before coming to a conclusion, which isn't always a bad thing, because it's probably not being an impulsive person over emotions. But at the same time, it can maybe, it can maybe impact some of their relationships, where a person's like, well, why do I have to answer all these questions? Why can't you just, feel what I feel? And it's like, moon in the third house person need a little bit more communication in what's going on before they can commit to what they feel, right? And so, but there's still, a level there of being able to reach them. It's just, you might have to reach them on a rational level, because the way their emotions work, it's got a layer over it where they have to be objective. They have to be rational about what they feel before they're able to express that. Now, but there's a connectivity though. These people are not disconnected, because the third house is linked to the social upbringing, right? Sometimes the moon person in third house can have close relationships with their family, especially like siblings, people they grew up with, cousins. So there's still a connection there. The third house moon person isn't disconnected. I wouldn't say they're detached or anything like that. Now again, other placements could indicate they are, but with the moon, there's still this like ability to connect to you, right? But when it comes to certain other aspects, they need to understand things first before they feel them, before you see that emotion. Because then it's like, once they get out enough information, now you're going to see the emotions pour out. And that could be good, that could be bad, right? So it really depends on what the moon is being fed, what's been giving, what you're giving it before it can really express itself. So Jupiter, okay. Jupiter in the third house. So Jupiter is about expansion, and Jupiter has more of this concept of wisdom because it's all encompassing. Jupiter rules the ninth house. And so when you have Jupiter, this person might appear to have luck when it comes to certain aspects of learning. You can look at a person with Jupiter in third house and look, wow, they're so smart. They know, they're so good at this. But really the Jupiter person values knowledge. So they're not doing it for the sake of proving that they know a fact. They're doing it, right, to add to a bigger picture, to add to their actual knowledge. So when you have Jupiter in the third house, there's a kind of more, I would say even maybe in some cases you have more of a jubilant personality, where the Mercury person is going to be good at communicating and talking and sharing what needs to be said. They're going to say what needs to be said when Mercury's in the third house. Jupiter can be more of this you know, expressive energy. And with that, sometimes you can, it depends on the sign. Jupiter can sometimes, for some people, kind of have this more bigger than life personality. This person talks a lot. This person says a lot of different things. In some cases, they might even, especially I said, if you have a Jupiter in Sagittarius, which Jupiter rules Sagittarius, great. But third house is of information. So when we put something that's all encompassing and wants to be big and seen, you're now going to have potentially an exaggeration, right? Third house exaggeration, because third house is supposed to be rational. It's not supposed to really be biased. But when we put certain planets in there, sometimes we can see these different things play out. But Jupiter is, because it's so wise, you usually need it to keep moving up, and you need to challenge yourself a little bit more. I've given an example before that I know somebody who was Jupiter in the third house, and this person skipped a grade when they were in elementary school because they just were really, really good at understanding things. You know, and I think sometimes with the Jupiter, though, it's like this all-encompassing, I know a lot, and this knowledge type of thing. But sometimes Jupiter in third house, depending on the person, needs to scale it back a little bit, because what happens sometimes is you can miss the minor details. Because Jupiter's about the big picture, and Jupiter can be this kind of risk-taking. And Jupiter is about growth. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think there's a lot of potential there for people to even make money or be known for their words when you have Jupiter kind of give you that luck of people being attracted to what you say, attracted to what you do. People kind of looking at you as somebody that they want to be around, they want to learn from. You have luck in your inner connections. You're going to be potentially even, like the sun is popular, right? But for being who they are. The sun is more that personality. There's something about them. The Jupiter would be more, your people are just drawn to you, right? They're just drawn to you because of your magnetism, or the way in which you talk to people, and the way in which you're very open and expressive. So Jupiter in third house person is really going to be typically that really expressive type of energy person. Mars is motivated through ideas. Mars takes their idea, now to do something with it. One example of that, I believe Mark Zuckerberg has Mars. He has something else too, I think Uranus, right? Mars, motivated. I'm going to move based on my ideas. When I get something, I now have to do something with it. Mars is action. I believe he's Mars and Scorpio, Zuckerberg. So that would make a lot of sense if you know anything about Mars and Scorpio. Third house of information. He created Facebook. Now, this idea that he had wasn't just something that he sat on. He did something with it. And that's the thing with Mars energy. Sometimes people are like, really don't know how to move themselves forward because they're just like, well, what do I do? It's like, you have to start somewhere. Facebook was not, when Facebook first came out, it was a wall. You had a wall, like you know, all people could do was post on your wall. There was no embedded videos. Could not do all the things that you do now. Okay, so that's what I say by like this Mars energy, or just energy in general. Like, you have to start somewhere, right? Obviously, if Facebook was going to be as big as it is, no one knew that it was, but at the same time, like, he had to start somewhere. So the Mars in third house person takes ideas and says, how do I make this magnified? How do I make this a part of my mission? How do I make this something that I actually go out and do and start? So Mars influences the third house in that way. Toni Morrison also had Mars in the third house, but hers was in Cancer. So you see she had Pluto and Mars in third house, most likely showing her ability to transform and really move and drive conversation. Third house, communication, conversation. You know, she drove a lot of conversation regarding race and gender in America. So, you know, that is one way in shape. That's one way that's shown. Other thing about Mars sometimes in the third house, for some people, they can be really verbally combative. You know, they have an answer for everything. So Mars is wherever your conflict is going to be. Just like, you know, in some other cases, Mars in 12th house, your conflict's going to be with yourself, internal. You know, with Mars in 7th house, you have to watch conflict in relationships. So Mars in 3rd house, people tend to, even in their family, I mean, siblings, there could be conflict, arguments, or maybe like, it's not even always like it's a huge, big thing, but it might just be like, you know, you think you know more than them, you're argumentative, something like that. Okay. So now we're going to look at, let's see what I've done. I think I need two more. Neptune. So Neptune is interesting in the 3rd house because the 3rd house is about ideas and things that we can see are true, or things that we can, or facts, Neptune has nothing to do with facts. Neptune is about illusion and idealism and dreams and our wishes and our wants and us having that imaginative spirit to us. So with Neptune being that way, you have to look at the fact that Neptune in third house person is typically descriptive with their words. This could be a great placement for someone who's writing. Neptune in the third house also can sometimes indicate a person who's spiritual in some way, shape, or form. They communicate what they know. They share what they've experienced regarding spiritual things. So when you see Neptune third house, it's a person who's a little bit more in touch with humanity sometimes as well. And they drive that through what they communicate. And communication can again be verbal or it can be in writing. All right. An example of that, let's say Stephen King, I believe, has Neptune in the third house. His, what did we say earlier? I think it was another placement too, Venus. So of course he could take you to another place in his writing. He has an imagination. You see what I'm saying? So Neptune is going to cause you to have all these thoughts and all of these, you know, these ideas that are not grounded in reality, right? So Mercury can say, I read the paper today. This is what I learned. You know, Saturn can be like, this is what I've been studying. Neptune is not concrete. So Neptune energy is really going to be about this imagination. What do you do with it? So Stephen King's case or someone else's case, he wrote what's in here, gets written down, gets produced into a book. Okay, so that's another example of Neptune. Neptune's imagination being able to impact people's ideas when it comes to those energies in the third house. Another example, let's see what we have. I would say even Madonna. I believe Madonna, let me try to remember. I could be wrong. I believe she was raised Catholic, but then she got interested in Kabbalah later in life. I know she has like some spiritual beliefs, and I believe she has Neptune. When I looked it up, she had Neptune in the third house. So again, the Neptune third house person, again, and the third house is usually communicated in some way. We see it. It's not something she's hiding, right? So when we see Neptune the third house, this person's going to communicate something. Whatever's in the third house is going to be communicated in some way, shape, or form. Eventually, it's going to be communicated, shared with other people. Now, Uranus. All right, you're Uranus in the third house. So, one thing, the descriptor I wanted to make for Neptune is fact meets fiction. The third house is about the facts and objectivity. But when we put Neptune in the third house, we have some imagination going on there, you know, and whether this person's just really good at, maybe this person isn't a writer, but maybe this person is just really good at telling stories, or maybe this person is just communicates through another venue, another platform. Person communicates something. They have just this vivid way of looking at things, a very vivid vision. Can be Neptune in the third house as well. So when you're Neptune in the third house, just understand that energy is not always going to feel aligned until you decide to actually, you know, communicate whatever is going on with your imagination and communicating those things to others. And Uranus is different in the sense that it is a planet that's said to be unpredictable. It is not steady. It is not Saturn. It is not direct. It is not Mars. Uranus is like unique thoughts. So when you put unique thoughts in the third house, this person might be more of a conspiracy theorist in some way. This person might have unique expression. This person might just have a different way in which they communicate. This person might just be like a creative genius, and that is why that placement is there. So when you have someone with Uranus in the third house, they have to be given the opportunity to make those connections. They're not going to be Mercury. Mercury is direct. Uranus people can have that kind of, now if you have someone with Uranus and Neptune in the third house, they are meant to create a vision and share that with people and put that out there for other people to consume and see. Technology is also dealing with Uranus in the third house. So it could also be someone who's a techie, someone who's good with technology, someone who should use technology to share or voice their opinion. The thing with Uranus energy is like, it's neat, it's not steady, it's unpredictable, it's not traditional, it's strange sometimes, but it's needed because otherwise everything would be the status quo. If we didn't have Uranus energy anywhere, everything would be exactly the same. And sometimes in order to solve a problem or to, you know, further society, we need this energy to say, we've never tried this before. What if we tried this? What if we did this? And so that's the Uranus person. In your group of friends, that's that person like, we haven't tried this. Why don't we just do this? And you're like, that's weird, but that might work. Zuckerberg, I believe, also has Uranus there. No, now he got Mars in Uranus. And if he has, well, the ones I look up, I use the verified sites. Again, take that with yourself, but like, I don't, you know, I use, I have software that actually loads up birth charts of famous people. Then I use another site that tells you the accuracy of the birth chart, because sometimes for some people who are famous, we actually don't know their birth time. For some people we do. But if he has Uranus and Mars in the 3rd house, no wonder he made all this money and off this really innovative idea like Facebook. So his Mars and Uranus are working together, because Uranus by itself sometimes, just be careful. Again, everything depends on the whole chart. By itself, unchecked, Uranus can become sporadic ideas that don't really fit with anything else in your life, right? It can become having strange ideas that no one can relate to. It can mean, you know, the person who's like, you know, wow, the person's always saying something crazy. I don't even understand what they're talking about. So it's important that Uranus is if we want to make it beneficial, that it's somewhere, it's able to use their unique ideas for good, instead of just being seen as odd or eccentric or weird. So that was it for this video. Please like if you got some value out of this video. Also make sure, again, like I said in the beginning, if you made it to the end, that you follow me on Instagram as well. Amethyst Virgo. Thanks.